Well, I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because you brought up uh, blood DNA of an unknown individual that was found, I think, on the handrail.
Yes.
Doesn't that necessarily not exclude Mr. Kohberg? What it may do is suggest there might be a potential other person in addition involved.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun. To dream, believe.
Let's listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And in this episode, we are going to answer every possible question you have about the unknown male DNA found at the crime scene, and all the documentation throughout this court case that relates to that unknown male DNA. And let me tell you this, I've always been of the opinion that those that are willing to go the extra distance and do the research will reap the reward. And the reward in this case is always clarity. And I do get a little bit frustrated when I see people take, information that's not evidence. It's not evidence when you find, an old text message of somebody that's, one person removed from the family in the case that says, well, Xana was the first victim to be unalive because, law enforcement told the family that. And then you take that and then you go running with it like it's breaking news and make up a bunch of other stuff that goes along with it. That's not evidence. That's somebody's random post on a website. Give me a break. That's not doing work. That's just spreading ridiculousness. Yeah, I said it. And I mean, it's no different than taking a 4chan post by some moron a month after the atrocity that says in no strict English terms that there was a fight at the frat house with Ethan and Loach over somebody calling him, saying, he's on steroids and he has shriveled up testes. That's not evidence of a fight at the frat house. And there's been so much BS, strewn throughout this case over that fight at the frat house. And the only evidence they can point to that there was ever even an altercation at the frat house was a random 4chan post. Give me a break. Somebody show me evidence of a fight at the frat house. And until somebody wants to produce that evidence, tangible evidence of a fight at the frat house, they should be ashamed of themselves by talking about fights at the frat house. They're no better than the guilters that make up all the BS about this case that they make up. And you don't have to go to those links to bring up BS like that and then try to spread it as some type of evidence in the case, not helping anything. When you can go directly into the court record, there's been many hearings on this case. There's so much valid information out there that you can dig into and really expose some things in this case, but you got to not be lazy when you're doing this, or else you'll just keep spinning the same stupid yarns over and over. So, to prove that the effort and time to go in and actually find factual information produces good fruit, I'm going to prove it in this video. I've gone through and I've pulled everything that I can possibly pull as it relates to the 3 DNAs that are unknown. What happened to them? Were they ran through CODIS? Why didn't they pursue those? What's going on with them? And I'm going to report all of that information to you in this video. And let me tell you, folks, in the process of doing that, I've uncovered so many more things about this case. It is unreal. You probably want to watch the next 3 videos that I put out this weekend, throughout this weekend, because I have found so much information about this case just by deep diving that blows my mind, and I know it's going to blow yours. So when you're watching my videos this weekend, I assure you, you better put your socks on, tie them tight to your ankles, or else they're going to fall off and fly out the window. It's that big. But we're going to start with these 3 unknown male DNAs. Let's figure out what happened to them. What's the deal with them? And where are we going with this? Let's get right into it.
Well, Your Honor should never get to that question, but I'm going to answer it for you. But you should never get to that question because you should have already found that AT&T 1 and AT&T 2 were terrible, and there's no probable cause for those, and they just build on each other. So you should find that the very first one lacked probable cause, and then everything else does as well. But let me answer your question there. If the magistrate judge had been told there's unknown male B in blood in the house attached to the handrail, that might have made more of a difference to her. Maybe a sheath that can be carried to the house and blood in the house that's not the same, maybe that matters. And then maybe the car being completely empty of any blood DNA connection, maybe that matters a little bit more.
Well, I'm just not sure why it matters for probable cause, but I think we're talking over each other, so I'll let you just go on.
Okay. I don't think probable cause is in a vacuum. I think probable cause isn't one thing. I hope it's not one thing. I hope there has to be a little bit more than one thing, especially when you've got another thing that's the same as the one thing.
Well, I said I wouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway because you brought up blood DNA of an unknown individual that was found, I think, on the handrail.
Yes.
Doesn't that necessarily not exclude Mr. Kohberger? What it may do is suggest there might be a potential other person in addition involved if you assume that that blood was related to the victims and not some earlier event in the house.
If what the court is saying is exactly why the magistrate needed to know that. Is there another explanation here? I've got this sheath, but there are all these other things that if I know about them, matter. What's the other explanation? What's going on with this investigation? What's happening here? That's exactly the point, Your Honor. What other explanation is there? The magistrate wasn't given a chance to ask that. She wasn't given a chance to ask that when she wasn't told about unknown male B, blood on the handrail. She wasn't given a chance to ask about that when she wasn't told about unknown male D, blood on a glove right outside the residence. She wasn't given a chance to ask any of those questions. She didn't know that Bryan's car and the court's question, good question, what does that mean? Could it mean there's more than one person? The answer to that is, or it could mean it's not Bryan because his car's got nothing in it.
Now, first, we've got to address what we learned just in that little clip. The first thing that we learned is the judge, after seeing everything that he's seen in the court record, now is of the conclusion that this was a multiple perp crime. That cannot be disputed anymore. And with it being a multiple perp crime, everything changes in this case. All of the moronic stuff about the Ted Bundy and all that kind of crap is gone. In fact, the only argument that I've heard that even is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard in my life now is from Howard Bloom that he put out yesterday. And we'll listen to that in just a minute. Totally, ridiculously stupid. And this is the kind of stuff people will try to justify in their mind now that this huge information has hit the streets. But the other thing that we have a question about after listening to that is Ann Taylor now says A, B, C, and D. That is 4 different male DNA found at the crime scene. We can assume that unknown male DNA A is what they discovered from the knife sheath. That is an easy thing to assume. That leaves B, C, and D. B, C, and D. Yeah, A, B, C, and D. All right, so that leaves B, C, and D. Now, what did we hear her say? Unknown male, B. Blood found on the handrail. Unknown male, D. Blood found on a glove outside. Now, one thing that she did not mention was unknown male DNA, C. The reason I believe she didn't mention it is because unknown male DNA C is not actually blood DNA. She was putting her effort and emphasis on the fact that those other two things were blood, and she's doing that for a reason. You got to know everything she says in these hearings, she plugs in there for a reason. It's related to setting up a later argument. And I believe she focused on the two blood DNA because that would have been the most logical route for the Idaho State Police and the FBI to go to when it relates to IgG, because you can do a much more thorough investigation on IgG if you have blood DNA, because then you don't have to focus on the degradation of the sample. You've got blood DNA, you've got full STRs in that DNA, which is much more compelling when you search it in a SNP profile. But she focused on those two things, I believe, for a reason. But what about the one that she didn't focus on? Is there any information that we can gather from the court record that lets us know where that was found? One only has to dive into the court docs to find this in one of the replies. Factual background: on November 13, 2022, law enforcement responding to a 911 call found Maddie, Kaylee, Xana, and Ethan deceased. Law enforcement later found a K-bar knife sheath placed next to Miss Mogan on her bed. You can bet that word placed, she put that in there for a big reason. We're going to talk about that in the next video. The sheath was placed button side down and partially under Miss Mogan and the comforter. On November 20th, 2022, the Idaho State Police Lab in Meridian, Idaho, located DNA on the button of the sheath and performed, now that's interesting, she said on the button of the sheath and not the button snap, but button of the sheath, and she performed STR analysis that led nowhere when ran through CODIS, Combined DNA Index System, other than to show the provider was a male. By December 17th, 2022, lab analysts were aware of two additional males' DNA within the house where the deceased were located, and another unknown male DNA on a glove found outside the residence on November 20th, 2022. To this date, the defense is unaware of what sort of testing, if any, was conducted on these samples other than the STR DNA profiles. Further, these three separate and distinct male DNA profiles were not identified through CODIS, leading to the conclusion that the profiles do not belong to Mr. Kohberger. While this was ongoing, police were investigating many various possible suspects. Many of them provided DNA. At least one had his DNA surreptitiously taken from a discarded cigarette. Many also had their phones taken and downloaded. Now, surreptitiously taken from a discarded cigarette. You can bet that wasn't a frat boy. But let me tell you this. On December 17th is when the lab analysts were aware of the two additional male DNAs. And even though it says that the male DNA profiles were not identified through CODIS, leading to the conclusion that the profiles do not belong to Mr. Kohberger, there is nothing that we're going to find in the court record where the defense was given these results from running these through CODIS. At the end of this, I'm coming to the conclusion they didn't even run them through CODIS. And here is why, and this backs up everything that we've said, because it says that by December 17th, lab analysts were aware of these two additional male DNA. Well, by December 17th, I firmly believe that, I know that Kopaka was unalive, but also they were on to Kohberger through Kopaka's phone. So they already had the idea that Kohberger was the assailant. They were already working on bogging up that family tree DNA for the FBI to release their bogged up records on December 19th. So they had no reason, just like that Elantra that they found in Eugene, Oregon about the same time. They didn't investigate it, just like they didn't investigate the additional male DNA, because they already had their suspect in mind and they were working on the setup to get him arrested. That is what the only conclusion you can come to from this. You see, now that all this stuff has come to light, and you know now what the record of the court is for the dates that things really happened in this case, then when you start to analyze the information, there's no more doubts when you analyze it. You know what happened based on the information and the dates around the information. By them not locating those additional male DNA profiles until December 17th, they were way too far gone in trying to implicate Bryan Kohberger in this case through a falsified family tree experiment to even take the time to investigate those other male DNA profiles any further. And it's proof to the pudding, as you're going to see here in just a minute, when we see what the outcome of the male DNA profiles ended up being in this case, because the outcome is very shocking of what happened to those profiles. And there's no other reason, let me just say this, to eliminate those profiles entirely from anybody's view other than to eliminate exculpatory evidence that would have led to it would have proven Bryan Kohberger innocent in the case. It's the only reason to get rid of that evidence. That, and to keep under wraps any truth that that evidence may have produced that they didn't want to be known at the time. Let's look at the court record as it relates to all of the requests from the defense to obtain that evidence. And then we're going to see the final response from the prosecution to what happened to that evidence. Okay, so here is one of the motions to compel. I believe one of the first ones that relates to this particular subject. And you can see profiles uploaded to a DNA database. In the event that the case involves the upload of a DNA profile to either a local, state, or national database, please provide all documentation maintained by the testing laboratory, including documentation maintained by Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, personnel within the laboratory, including profiles that have been identified as unknown males, not the defendant. Documentation of all uploads, including interpretation and/or deconvolutions of mixed profiles, handwritten note spreadsheets, match estimator results, upload forms, and CODIS search forms. For each hit, please provide match detail reports and long-form candidate match reports for the hits, including partial hits and hits that are dispositioned to be non-matching, even if the laboratory has dispositioned a profile as a hit. Any state manuals regarding the use of the SDIS and NDIS database systems, any hits made to any profile uploaded, even if they hit on individuals not the defendant and deemed to not be candidate matches, including hits to any unknown males identified via testing. So this was them asking for it the first time in a very nice way. Now we see that the state filed a separate response to that request. After reviewing the materials provided, the following remains to be discovered. Request 3 profiles uploaded to a DNA database. The state has provided information related to this request for the seized item, the knife sheath, only. The defense has requested all DNA profiles, including 3 additional unidentified male DNA profiles developed during the course of law enforcement investigation. This information has not been supplied. So they haven't got the profiles of the 3 unknown males or any of the records of them uploading it into the CODIS database. Okay, now this was the last time it was asked for before the hearing that was demanding it. And you can see profiles uploaded to a DNA database, and it goes through the same stuff that we read in the first one of these. But at the bottom, you can see in italics, it says the state has provided information related to this request for the DNA on the snap of the knife sheath only. Now, this time it says the snap of the knife sheath. Before it said on the button of the knife sheath. Maybe that's the confusion between all this, whether it was the button or the snap, which is very important because the snap, that is pure brass. The defense has requested all DNA profiles, including additional profiles developed during the course of law enforcement investigation. See declarations of counsel from Mr. Kohberger, Bicca Barlow, and Steve Mercer filed simultaneously. So they haven't received anything on these 3 male DNA profiles, including their results from being entered into CODIS, which indicates that they never even uploaded those profiles to CODIS, much less continued on and tried to do a genetic genealogy search with them. What happened to those 3 male unidentified DNA profiles? We find out in the motion hearing for these motions from the prosecutor, Bill Thompson. And what we find out is devastatingly shocking.
That are included in that third motion I just called about for today. So they focus on that a genetic genealogy piece, but I wanted to make sure that that was still in the scope of the court.
Well, my understanding was that the state did provide all the information about the laboratory, let's say the laboratory DNA that was that analysis was not related to the genealogy DNA. Am I mistaken about that? What are you saying that they didn't provide?
Your Honor, in our third motion, Mr. Powell, we had a section called standard lab discovery, and that has to do with other DNA profiles found on the scene. They have provided full discovery for the sheet, the DNA found on the knife sheet, but not the other 3 unidentified male DNA samples to go in the house one would outside of it.
All right. So if I'm understanding your question there, or your assertion that you're talking about 3 potential analysis of DNA that was not provided to you, but that has no connection to Mr. Coley.
Correct.
Okay, it's fine.
Your Honor, we didn't realize it's going to be an issue today. We have given the defense everything we received from the lab. They've asked for DNA workups on other people. To the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done. We can't produce something that doesn't exist. We have provided everything. There's one outstanding lab report that relates to the forensic examination by the lab personnel of the crime scene itself will be received today. That's the only outstanding lab report. Everything else, along with all the notes, is what there is, and it's been provided to defense.
You and other DNA profiles found on the scene. They have provided full discovery for the sheet, the DNA found on the knife sheet, but not the other 3 unidentified male DNA samples to go in the house one would outside of it.
Your Honor, we didn't realize it's going to be an issue today. We have given the defense everything we received from the lab. They've asked for DNA workups on other people. To the extent that they don't have them, they weren't done.
You heard that with your own ears, right? Bill Thompson says the DNA workups on the other people, to the extent that they don't have them, they were not done. They never put them through CODIS. They never did anything with them. But more to the point, doesn't appear like they still have them, because everything that the prosecution said they have, they've given to the defense. And that was the last we ever heard of the 3 unknown male DNAs until this recent hearing with Ann Taylor and the judge on the 23rd of this month. So the answers to the questions about the 3 male DNAs that are unknown, she just said 2 of them were found in the house, 1 of them was outside. We now know that one was blood on the handrail, the other one was blood in a glove. So that would only mean that the other unknown male DNA was probably something found inside one of the rooms with the victims that was not blood. But you have questions about what those are, your questions are answered now. You have questions about what happened when they put them through CODIS. Well, there's your answer. They were never put through CODIS. And where are those samples now? I guess buried somewhere with the murder weapon. But those are the facts of the case as it relates to the DNA. But why did they do it like that? Well, you can bet, because they already had their suspect on December 17th, not December 19th. So going and searching through more male DNA when they discovered it, it was immaterial to them at that point, because they already had their eyes on their suspect and they were building the case around their suspect. Anything else at that point didn't matter. Finding a abandoned Elantra that matched the description of suspect vehicle 1 in Oregon at that point, it didn't matter. That's why they never went down there and investigated it. They just ruled it out. Oh yeah, let me tell the media, we're ruling that one out. It's not it. Why'd they rule it out? Because they already had their suspect before December 19th when the IgG was produced, which proves that the IgG was a backwards operation in place because they didn't want to disclose the information given to them by their confidential informant. And in the next video, I will firmly back that up even more with the defense's strategy for trial and the person that they're going to go after the hardest once we get to trial as it relates to how that knife sheath got placed at the crime scene. Oh, I've uncovered so much about that, you're going to freak completely out. But we're not done with this one, because once this information now is known to the public, questions arise. So it has to be answered somehow. What will the mainstream media do to try to back up some answers to questions that there's no way you can really answer? Well, they will make up unbelievable BS. Listen to this.
On the subject of blood, what you were going to say, we learned about those two other spots of blood.
Yeah. In the course of the hearing on January 23rd, Ann Taylor, Kohberger's attorney, revealed that there has been blood found in the house belonging to 2 unknown males. The blood was found on a banister, a handrail, going up to the 2nd floor, and also inside a glove outside the front of the house. Blood from 2 unknown people. Now, this was a party house, so you can imagine there'd be fingerprints on the handrail, but what reason is there for blood? And what reason is for there to be blood on the glove? And if, they would belong to someone who had gone to the house during one of the parties, well, how hard would it have been for the authorities to track down the fraternity boys who came in and out of the house and gotten blood samples from them? But to this day, 2.5 years later, they still have not been able to identify the blood. When the judge heard this, he said in open court, "Are you saying that Kohberger had other people working with him? This doesn't mean Kohberger wasn't involved, but there could have been accomplices. Accomplices, this throws out, a new mystery into the case. And here is how Ann Taylor is using it. She says the real question is, how did the knife sheath get there? She is now going to argue in the course of the trial that these 2 unknown males, either one of them or both of them, put the knife sheath on the bed. They were involved in the murder, and Kohberger, prior to the murder, had somehow innocently touched the knife sheath. The DNA on the knife sheath is just touch DNA. And she is claiming that, or will claim at the trial, that this was done innocently by Kohberger. It's a argument that can raise a lot of doubts, I believe, in a jury's mind. And the prospect that there could have been accomplices in the murder further complicates the case.
Did the prosecution, did the FBI do any genetic genealogy on the DNA from the blood?
All I know is what was revealed in the court, and the court referred to it as unknown males. And, you know, it
Any
seems that they can
theories
track
on
it down.
how not one but two men's DNA got on this crime scene, Howard?
Well, I'll throw out a hypothesis, and again, it's just a hypothesis, and maybe it's a sketchy one, but I believe Kohberger was guilty. I can't get around the cheek swab DNA that ties him there. So if he was out to commit the perfect crime, if he was a student of forensics, he could have taken a vial of blood with him. He could have put it on the banister. He could have taken a glove with blood already embedded in it and left it at the crime scene. And he could have done this deliberately to put the authorities, to look for two other people. And he would have, meanwhile, been just gotten away with it. And it all would have worked if he hadn't left the knife sheath behind.
It's a fascinating theory.
It's not a fascinating theory, Megan. That's an asinine theory. And you know it. And more to the point, Howard Bloom knew it. That's why when he started off his moronic theory, he started it off with, well, this hypothesis is kind of sketch. Yeah, I bet, man, because you know that's the stupidest thing that you ever said, Howard Bloom. But to answer your question, Megan, if you watch this video and you get some accurate information, you'll know that no genetic genealogy was done on those samples. STRDNA testing, as far as we know, wasn't even done on those samples. What happened to those samples? They wadded them up, threw them away, as far as we know, according to the prosecutor. According to the prosecutor, everything we have and everything they have on those things we've given to you, which is nothing, so you got nothing. That's the facts. Not that BS that you just heard there, but that's the kind of crap that the guilters and the morons are going to try to spin. They'll come up with stuff that ridiculous. Oh, Kohberger was trying to do the perfect crime. He brought vials of blood, but then he left his knife sheath. Well, moron, under that hypothesis, why don't you make it even more real? That somebody else that was probably a student like Kohberger came up with the perfect crime. And instead of, just planting blood evidence on the rail and in the glove outside, he planted his touch DNA on the knife sheath and left it at the scene. Wow, this guy was a genius. He was one of those guys that really wanted to see if he could pull off the perfect crime. I mean, that would be more apt to be believed than you're stupid. Then Kohberger came up with the other stuff, but then left his knife sheath. He's so smart but he's so stupid at the same time. No, how about somebody else was so smart they did it all and didn't make a stupid mistake, like driving their car to the crime scene and bringing their phone with them. And give me a break. All right, when evidence comes out on this thing that's contradicting to the fact, these morons are going to try to explain it away with fairy tale land stuff. So we've got to be able to combat it with facts, because the public's hearing that. And if the public can't hear the truth, well, then the truth will never be revealed. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, criticisms. I got some big stuff coming to you this weekend. Until then, Pavarotti's out.
Until I